Taemin Park stood at the viewing port of Coalition Station Nexus 7, watching the massive Vorthak dreadnought slowly turn toward the human colony below. The ship was beautiful in a terrifying way. Its crystalline hull caught the light from 3 suns and threw it back in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Taemin had seen many Vorthak ships in his 5 years as a human liaison officer, but this one was different. This one carried death. "Commander Park," came a voice behind him. Taemin turned to see Captain Jolmar, one of the few alien species that still treated humans with something approaching respect. The reptilian officer's scales were dark with worry. "The High Crystallarch has given the order. Colony 779 will be cleansed." Taemin felt his stomach drop. Colony 779 was home to 50,000 humans. Men, women, children who had done nothing more than ask for better working conditions in the mining facilities. The Vorthak called it rebellion. Humans called it wanting to live. "How long do we have?" Taemin asked, though he already knew the answer. "It has already begun." Through the viewing port, Taemin watched as the dreadnought's main weapon began to glow. The Vorthak were efficient killers. They did not waste time with warnings or negotiations. A species that had conquered 800 star systems in 3,000 years did not get there by showing mercy to those they considered inferior. The weapon fired. A beam of pure energy, focused and controlled, struck the colony's main settlement. The explosion was visible even from orbit. In seconds, 10,000 lives were gone. The beam moved to the next settlement, then the next. The Vorthak were methodical in their destruction. Taemin closed his eyes, but he could not close his ears. The communication channels were full of screaming, pleading, crying. Then one by one the voices went silent. Impressive, is it not? The voice was like crystal breaking, musical but sharp. Taemin opened his eyes to see High Crystallarch Vexthul approaching. The Vorthak leader was 12 feet tall, his body made of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. Energy crackled around his fingers like tame lightning. 50,000 people, Taemin said quietly. 50,000 servants who forgot their place, Vexthul corrected. "This is the natural order, human. We are the apex. You are not. When you remember this, you live. When you forget..." He gestured toward the window, where the last settlement was disappearing in fire. Taemin wanted to say something, to argue, to fight, but he was one human among thousands of Vorthak. His people had tried fighting when the crystal beings first arrived at Earth 200 years ago. It had lasted 6 hours. Since then, humanity had learned to survive by being useful. They were laborers, servants, maintenance workers. They kept the galaxy running while their betters ruled it. "Do you understand, Commander Park?" Vexthul asked. "Yes, High Crystallarch." "Good. Then you will explain to your people that this is what happens to those who rise above their station. The Vorthak Empire has stood for 3 millennia because we understand power. We are stronger, faster, smarter. We can manipulate energy with our thoughts while you struggle with crude machines. We are evolution's chosen ones." Vexthul left, his crystal feet making small musical sounds on the metal floor. Taemin stayed at the window watching the dead world below. In a few days, new humans would be shipped in to restart the mining operations. The Vorthak would record this as a minor administrative action. The deaths would be filed under personnel restructuring. On the other side of the station, Dr. So-Young Kim was having problems of her own. The Vorthak had assigned her to study their biology, supposedly to help improve human-Vorthak cooperation. In reality, they wanted her to find ways to make humans more efficient workers. She had been poking and prodding at Vorthak tissue samples for 3 years, learning how their crystal bodies worked. Today, however, she had found something interesting. "Computer, run analysis sequence 77 again," she said to her lab's AI. The screen lit up with data about Vorthak energy absorption rates. So-Young had been studying how the crystal beings could take in energy from their environment and use it to power their abilities. It was remarkable technology, far beyond human understanding. But today she had noticed something in the old data that made her heart race. The Vorthak could absorb massive amounts of energy, but there was a limit. And when they reached that limit, something very interesting happened. The crystals began to vibrate at a specific frequency. If that frequency was matched by an outside source, "Computer, model what happens if we introduce matching resonance frequency at 97% absorption capacity." The simulation ran. So-Young watched as the virtual Vorthak crystal structure began to shake, then crack, then explode in a cascade of destruction that spread through the entire body in milliseconds. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she deleted the simulation and all traces of her research. Some knowledge was too dangerous to leave lying around. Meanwhile, in the cargo holds of the station, Jinwoo Lee was conducting business. Officially, he was a supply coordinator, managing the flow of goods between human colonies and Vorthak worlds. Unofficially, he was a smuggler, moving things that the crystal beings preferred not to know about. "These medical supplies," said the nervous-looking human across from him. "They need to get to the research facility on Kepler Station." Jinwoo nodded. He had been making runs like this for 2 years, ever since he realized that humans scattered across the galaxy were starting to communicate in ways the Vorthak did not monitor. Medical supplies, food shipments, replacement parts for mining equipment, all innocent things, all carrying hidden messages, small devices, or people who needed to disappear for a while. "The usual rate?" Jinwoo asked. "Double," the man said. "And Jinwoo, be careful. Something big is happening. The humans in the outer systems are talking." Jinwoo loaded the supplies onto his ship, the Silent Thunder. She was not much to look at, built from scrapped parts and held together with determination. But she was fast, and more importantly, she was invisible to Vorthak scanners. The crystal beings were so advanced that they could not imagine humans building anything worth their attention. As Jinwoo prepared for departure, he received a message on his personal communicator. It was from his younger brother Hyunwoo, who worked in the maintenance section. "Jinwoo, stay away from Section 7 today. Vexthul is conducting an inspection. He's in a bad mood after that colony thing." Jinwoo was about to respond when alarms began blaring throughout the station. He rushed to a viewing port and saw Vorthak security forces surrounding a group of human workers in Section 7. At the center of the group was a young man who looked terrified. It was Hyunwoo. Vexthul approached the group, his crystal body pulsing with angry red light. "Which one of you looked directly at me during the inspection?" The humans stood silent. Looking directly at a Vorthak without permission was considered a serious insult. But Hyunwoo was young and had probably just been nervous. "I will ask once more," Vexthul said, energy beginning to gather around his hands. Hyunwoo stepped forward. "It was me, High Crystal Arc. I'm sorry." "I didn't mean..." The energy bolt hit him in the chest. Hyunwoo's body was thrown against the wall and did not move again. The other humans stared in shock, but none of them moved. They had learned that trying to help would only result in more deaths. "Let this be a lesson," Vexthul announced. "Humans who forget their place will be removed. We are the alpha species of this galaxy. You exist because we allow it." From his hiding spot near the cargo bay, Jinwoo watched his brother's body being dragged away like garbage. Taemin, monitoring the security feeds from his office, saw it too. So Young, working late in her lab, heard about it within the hour. That night, 3 humans in different parts of the station made the same decision. They would remember this day. They would remember Hyunwoo and Colony 779, and all the other times the Vorthak had reminded humans of their place in the universe. They would remember, and someday they would respond. The Vorthak Empire had ruled for 3,000 years because they were strong, fast and smart, but they had never faced an enemy that was patient. They had never faced an enemy that could watch and learn, and plan for decades without showing their hand. They had never faced humans who had decided that being the servants was no longer acceptable. In her lab, So Young began making copies of her research. Careful copies, hidden in places the Vorthak would never think to look. Jinwoo started paying attention to the conversations of his passengers, learning which humans were angry enough to listen to dangerous ideas. Taemin began studying Vorthak military procedures, filing away every detail about their ships, their weapons, their tactics. The crystal beings had taught humanity an important lesson that day. They had shown that power meant everything in the universe. The Vorthak were wrong about only one thing. They assumed that power meant the same thing to everyone. To the Vorthak, power was about being strong enough to crush anyone who opposed them. To humans, power was about being smart enough to make sure your enemy never saw you coming. 5 years had passed since the destruction of Colony 779. 5 years since Hyunwoo died for the crime of looking at his better. In that time, the galaxy had continued turning, and the Vorthak Empire had continued expanding. They had conquered 3 more star systems and added 40 billion new servants to their workforce. What they had not noticed was that their human servants had become very, very busy. General Minho Choi had once been a coalition military officer, back when the coalition still pretended that non-Vorthak species had rights. Now he cleaned floors in the Vorthak Military Academy on their capital world. Every day he pushed his cleaning cart through the halls where young crystal beings learned the art of conquest. Every day, he listened to their lessons about tactics, technology, and the proper way to crush inferior species. Every night, he wrote down everything he heard. The key to Vorthak military doctrine, he whispered into his hidden recorder, is overwhelming superiority. They never fight fair fights. Every engagement is planned to ensure they have at least 10 times the firepower of their enemy. This means they do not train for desperate situations. They do not plan for being outnumbered. They do not know how to lose. Minho was not the only human taking notes. In every Vorthak facility across 800 star systems, human janitors, maintenance workers, and supply clerks were watching and recording. They mapped every ship, every base, every weapon. They learned the names and faces of every important Vorthak leader. They studied guard rotations, supply schedules, and communication protocols. The Vorthak called it the documentation. They did not know about it because they had never imagined that their servants might be intelligent enough to organize such an effort. On the hidden asteroid base that Jinwoo's network had established in the Outer Rim, Dr. So-Young Kim was no longer alone. Her research team had grown to 200 of the finest human scientists, all of them supposedly dead according to official records. The base itself was built inside a worthless rock that the Vorthak had dismissed as uninteresting decades ago. The resonance cascade effect is definitely achievable, So-Young explained to her team, but we need massive power sources, more power than any human technology can generate. Engineer Yoonji Nam raised her hand. She had been working on power systems for 3 years, ever since her transport had been attacked by pirates near Vega Station. The Vorthak never investigated thoroughly when humans died in remote areas. What if we used their own power sources against them? So-Young smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Show me what you mean. Yoonji activated a holographic display. Vorthak ships use crystalline power cores that generate massive amounts of energy. If we could overload those cores at the exact moment we trigger a resonance cascade, the ship's own power would amplify the effect. So-Young finished. The bigger the ship, the bigger the explosion. Dr. Shungjun Park, Taemin's cousin, spoke up from his workstation. I've been studying their communication networks. The Vorthak use something called the Crystal Matrix to share information across their empire. It's like a living computer network that connects every Vorthak to every other Vorthak. That's how they coordinate so well, Yoonji said. No wonder they can manage an empire this size. Yes, Shungjun said quietly. But networks can carry more than information. They can carry viruses. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what he was suggesting. Meanwhile, Jinwoo Lee was having the most profitable 5 years of his career. His smuggling operation had grown into a sophisticated network of ships, hidden bases, and communication relays. On paper, he was still just a cargo hauler moving supplies between human colonies. In reality, he was the logistics coordinator for the largest intelligence operation in galactic history. His ship, the Silent Thunder, had been rebuilt so many times that almost nothing of the original remained. She was faster now, with better shields and weapons that were carefully hidden from Vorthak inspections. More importantly, she had been fitted with the most advanced scanning equipment that human technology could produce. Another patrol route mapped, reported Captain Dong-Hyun Shin, Jinwoo's best pilot. The Vorthak 7th Fleet follows exactly the same pattern every 18 days. They're so confident in their superiority that they don't even try to be unpredictable. Jinwoo nodded. The Vorthak military was incredibly powerful, but it was also incredibly arrogant. They had not fought a real war in 1,000 years. Most of their battles were one-sided massacres against species armed with primitive weapons. They had forgotten that war was supposed to be unpredictable. What about their communication timing? Jinwoo asked. Every 6 hours exactly. All ships report to Fleet Command at the same time. If something happened to their communication relays during that 6-hour window, they would be blind and isolated, Jinwoo finished. Good work. Back on Nexus 7, Taemin Park had been promoted to Senior Liaison Officer. The promotion came with access to higher-level Vorthak communications and military reports. It also came with a much clearer view of just how vast the Crystal Empire really was. The Vorthak military consists of 47 fleets, he recorded in his hidden files. Each fleet contains between 50 and 200 ships. Total estimated strength, 4,000 major vessels supported by approximately 15,000 smaller craft. Personnel, roughly 12 million Vorthak military officers and 3 billion support staff from conquered species. The numbers were staggering. Even if humans could build weapons that worked against the Vorthak, they were outnumbered by millions to one. But Taemin had learned something important in his years of studying his enemy. The Vorthak Empire was not really 12 million soldiers and 3 billion supporters. It was a handful of crystal beings who made all the decisions, supported by countless servants who did what they were told without understanding why. The key insight, he whispered to his recorder, is that the Vorthak do not trust their conquered species with real responsibility. Every important decision is made by a Vorthak. Every critical system is controlled by crystal being. They have built an empire that depends entirely on their own people for leadership. This meant that if something happened to the Vorthak themselves, their vast empire would collapse like a house of cards. Admiral Sujin Kang was studying the same problem from a different angle. She had once commanded coalition warships back when such things existed. Now she oversaw waste management for 3-star systems. Her real job was building humanity's first secret military fleet. The ships were small, built in hidden shipyards using materials that Jinwoo's network had lost during routine cargo transfers. Each vessel was designed for a specific purpose: reconnaissance, communications disruption, or precision strikes against critical targets. The Vorthak have never faced stealth warfare, she explained to her officers during a secret meeting in an abandoned mining station. Their sensors are designed to detect large fleets and energy signatures. They cannot see small ships using passive systems. Lieutenant Jae-hyun, her best pilot, raised a concern. What about their defensive capabilities? Even a small Vorthak ship has enough firepower to destroy a city. That's why we won't be fighting their ships directly, Sujin replied. We'll be fighting their infrastructure. Power plants, communication arrays, supply depots. The Vorthak Empire is huge, but it depends on thousands of support facilities to function. If those facilities started disappearing, Intelligence Coordinator Hana Yu had been mapping those facilities for 3 years. Her network of human spies had identified every major Vorthak installation in known space. More importantly, they had identified the critical points where the Empire was vulnerable. The Vorthak use a hub-and-spoke communication system, she explained. Each sector reports to a regional command center, which reports to one of 7 fleet headquarters which report to the capital world. If we could take out the right targets in the right order, we could isolate their forces and prevent them from coordinating a response. It was an ambitious plan. It was also completely insane. Humans were talking about fighting a 3,000-year-old empire that had never known defeat. They were planning to take on an enemy that could vaporize planets with single ships, but they were also angry. 5 years of watching the Vorthak casually murder humans had taught them that their choice was simple: fight or die as slaves. The turning point came when Hana's network intercepted a Vorthak military communication that made everything clear. High Crystallarch Vexthal was planning another discipline action against human colonies that had been too slow to meet their mining quotas. This time he intended to destroy 10 colonies simultaneously as an example to the others. 500,000 humans were going to die to make a point about productivity. That's it, Taemin said during an emergency meeting of the resistance leadership. We're out of time. If we're going to do this, it has to be now. So-young looked up from her research notes. The Cascade weapons are ready for testing. We have 3 prototypes. My ships are prepared for reconnaissance and strike missions, Sujin reported. We can deploy immediately. The intelligence network is in place, Hana added. We have eyes on every major target. Jinwoo was quiet for a moment, thinking about his dead brother. My logistics network can support a full-scale operation. We have enough supplies hid. The Vorthak patrol ship Crystal Harmony was 3 days out from its home base when it died. The death was quick and silent, happening in the space between one heartbeat and the next. One moment the ship was cruising through empty space with its crew of 47 crystal beings, confident in their invincibility. The next moment it was expanding debris and cooling metal. Lieutenant Jae-hyun watched the explosion from the cockpit of his experimental fighter, 200 kilometers away. The Cascade weapon had worked exactly as Dr. So Young had predicted. The Vorthak ship's own power core had amplified the resonance effect, turning the vessel into a bomb that destroyed itself from the inside out. Target eliminated, he reported into his communication system. No survivors detected, beginning evidence cleanup. For the next hour, Jae-hyun and his wingman used focused energy beams to vaporize the larger pieces of debris. When they were finished, nothing remained that could identify the wreckage as definitely Vorthak. To any investigation team, it would look like the ship had suffered a catastrophic power core failure. "Excellent work," came Admiral Sujin Kang's voice over the encrypted channel. "Return to base immediately. This mission never happened." 2 weeks later, the Vorthak High Command received a routine report about the loss of patrol ship Crystal Harmony. The investigating team concluded that the vessel had suffered a rare but not unprecedented power core malfunction. Such failures happened perhaps once every few years across the entire empire. The loss was recorded. The crew was declared dead with honor and life continued. High Crystallarch Vex Thule read the report with mild interest. Losing ships to equipment failure was annoying, but it was the price of maintaining such a vast empire. He approved the replacement ship and moved on to more important matters. He had no idea that humanity had just fired the opening shot of a war. Over the next 2 years, the pirate attacks on Vorthak shipping increased dramatically. Single ships would disappear near asteroid fields or in the empty space between star systems. Small supply convoys would simply vanish, leaving no trace except scattered debris that told no clear story about what had happened. The Vorthak military began increasing patrols and improving security protocols, but the attacks continued. Worse, they seemed to be getting more sophisticated. The attackers knew Vorthak patrol routes, supply schedules, and communication procedures. They struck when ships were most vulnerable and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Admiral Sujin's fleet had grown to 50 vessels, each one carefully designed for specific missions. Her ships operated in Vorthak space for weeks at a time, mapping defensive positions and identifying targets. The crystal beings never detected them because their sensors were designed to look for threats that fought like civilized species. With large fleets and obvious energy signatures. "Intelligence update," reported Captain Dong Hyun Shin during a fleet briefing. "We've identified a major weakness in their defensive network." The Vorthak research station at Kepler 442 is studying temporal mechanics. It's heavily defended, but it's also isolated from the main fleet. Sujin studied the tactical display. The station was indeed isolated, protected by only a small garrison of ships. More importantly, it was conducting research that could be valuable to the human resistance. "What's the strategic value?" she asked. "According to our sources, they're developing faster-than-light communication technology. If we could capture that research instead of just destroying it, we could coordinate our forces across the entire galaxy instantly," Sujin finished. "Approved. Prepare 12 fighters for a precision strike." The attack on the research station was humanity's first major operation against a significant Vorthak target. Lieutenant Jae-hyun led the strike force, now flying an improved fighter equipped with the latest Cascade weapons and anti-resonance shields. The assault began with the systematic elimination of the station's defensive perimeter. 6 small Vorthak patrol ships died in the first 30 seconds, their crews never knowing they were under attack. The station's shields collapsed under focused Cascade bombardment, and human fighters swarmed through the breach. What followed was not a battle, but a methodical execution. The humans had studied Vorthak station layouts for years. They knew exactly where to strike to disable life support, power systems, and communication arrays. Within 20 minutes, 3,000 Vorthak were dead, and the station's computer core was being downloaded into portable storage units. "Temporal mechanics research acquired," Jae-hyun reported. "Station secure. No survivors? Excellent. Plant the charges and withdraw. We want this to look like a reactor accident." The explosion that destroyed the research station was visible from 3 light-years away. When Vorthak investigators arrived, they found evidence of a massive containment failure in the temporal mechanics laboratory. The official report blamed the disaster on unsafe experimental procedures and warned against similar research in the future. High Crystallarch Vex Thule was beginning to feel something he had never experienced before: concern. The loss of the research station was a serious blow to the Empire's scientific advancement. More troubling was the increasing frequency of ships and facilities that were simply disappearing. Could this be the work of one of our subject species? He asked his intelligence chief during a private meeting. Unlikely, High Crystallarch. None of the conquered races possess the technology for these kinds of attacks. The weapons signatures suggest energy manipulation abilities equal to our own. Then we are facing a new enemy, one we have not encountered before. It would appear so. We should consider increasing fleet patrols and fortifying our border systems. Vexthal agreed, but privately he was troubled. The Vorthak Empire had faced rebels before, but never ones who seemed to understand Vorthak technology so well. These new enemies struck with precision that suggested detailed knowledge of crystal being capabilities and weaknesses. Meanwhile, in the hidden laboratories of the human resistance, Dr. So-Young Kim was having the best years of her scientific career. The captured temporal mechanics research had opened up entirely new possibilities for human weapons development. We can do more than just kill individual Vorthak, she explained to her expanded research team. We can create weapons that spread through their crystalline networks like a virus. If we can get close enough to one of their major communication hubs, engineer Yunji Nam was nodding excitedly, we could upload a cascade virus directly into their crystal matrix. It would spread to every connected Vorthak in the network. How many is that? Asked Dr. Seung-Jun Park. According to the stolen data, approximately 60% of their total population. All military personnel, all government officials, all scientists and engineers. The only Vorthak who aren't connected to the matrix are manual laborers and the very young. It was a sobering thought. They were talking about a weapon that could kill billions of sentient beings in a matter of hours. The moral implications, Yunji began, are irrelevant. Taemin Park interrupted. He had joined the research team after being promoted again, this time to Senior Strategic Coordinator. The Vorthak have made their position clear. They consider us animals to be used and discarded. They have killed millions of humans without a second thought. We tried to coexist with them. They made that impossible. The room fell silent. Everyone knew he was right, but that didn't make the knowledge easier to bear. Intelligence Coordinator Hana Yu was tracking the Vorthak response to the increasing attacks. They're deploying additional fleets to border regions, she reported. 3 full battle groups have been moved to patrol routes. They're also increasing security at major installations. Good, Taemin replied. That means they're scared. Fear makes people make mistakes. It also makes them more dangerous, Admiral Sujin pointed out. If they realize humans are behind these attacks, they won't, Hana said confidently. Our intelligence network has identified the perfect scapegoat. The Vorthak are already blaming increased attacks on the Zephyrian Confederacy. Apparently, there was a trade dispute last year. The Zephyrians were a proud warrior species that had been conquered by the Vorthak 50 years earlier. They had attempted several rebellions, all of which had been crushed brutally. They were the perfect suspects for this kind of coordinated resistance. Vexthal was thinking the same thing. The more he studied the pattern of attacks, the more convinced he became that the Zephyrians were responsible. Their warrior culture would certainly motivate them to strike back against their conquerors, and they had access to Vorthak technology through their positions as forced laborers. Prepare a punitive expedition, he ordered. 3 star systems with significant Zephyrian populations. We will make an example of them. The attack on the Zephyrian worlds was swift and merciless. 3 billion innocent beings died in the span of 6 hours. Their planets reduced to burning wastelands by Vorthak dreadnoughts. The message was clear. This was what happened to species that dared to strike back at their betters. From her hidden command center, Hana Yu watched the destruction with mixed feelings. The Zephyrians were innocent of the crimes they died for, but their sacrifice had bought humanity something invaluable: detailed tactical data on Vorthak fleet operations. Look at this, she said to her analysis team. The 3rd Fleet deployed in a standard suppression formation. 7 Dreadnought. The message that would end the Vorthak Empire was transmitted at exactly 0800 hours Galactic Standard Time. It lasted 3 seconds and consisted of a single word: symphony. Across 800 star systems, humans who had spent 7 years preparing for this moment received the signal and began the most coordinated military operation in galactic history. They had named it Operation Silent Symphony because by the end of the 72-hour operational window, the Vorthak Empire would be silent forever. Fleet Admiral Kyung-Soo Bae stood on the bridge of humanity's first dreadnought, the Retribution of Hyunwoo. watching as the opening movements of the symphony began. The ship had been built in secret over 3 years, using captured Vorthak technology and human engineering innovations. It was smaller than a Vorthak dreadnought, but faster, smarter, and carrying weapons specifically designed to kill crystal beings. Phase 1 is commencing, reported communications specialist Yunju Han from her position at the warfare console. All teams report ready. Phase 1 was elegant in its simplicity. Across the galaxy, 2,047 Vorthak communication relays died simultaneously. Each relay was destroyed by a small team of humans who had been positioned nearby for months, waiting for this moment. Some used explosive charges. Others used cascade weapons. A few simply overloaded the crystal networks with resonance frequencies that shattered the delicate communication equipment. The Vorthak Empire, which had ruled 800 star systems, through instant communication and centralized command, suddenly found itself deaf and mute. High Crystallarch Vexthul was in his command chamber on the capital world when the communication networks went dark. At first, he assumed it was a minor technical problem. The crystal matrix had experienced failures before, though never on this scale. "Engineering," he called. "What is the status of our communication grid?" The response should have been immediate. Instead, there was silence. Vexthul tried his personal communicator, then the emergency military channels, then the civilian networks. Nothing. Every communication system in the Empire had gone silent at exactly the same moment. This is not a technical failure, he realized. We are under attack. But by whom? And how had they managed to strike every communication relay simultaneously, across such a vast area? Phase 2 began exactly 1 hour after the communication blackout. Admiral Su Jin Kang's fleet, now expanded to over 300 vessels, struck 2,847 Vorthak military installations simultaneously. The targets had been carefully chosen over years of intelligence gathering: shipyards, supply depots, research facilities, and training academies. The attacks were swift and merciless. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, struck their targets with cascade weapons, and vanished before any defense could be organized. Within 6 hours, the Vorthak military had lost 60% of its infrastructure and support facilities. Lieutenant Jae Hyun-oh led the strike against the Vorthak Naval Academy, the training ground where crystal being officers learned to command fleets. His squadron of 12 fighters destroyed the Academy's defensive platforms in the first minute, then systematically eliminated the training vessels in orbit. "Academy secured," he reported. "No survivors detected." Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Vorthak military machine, built over 3 millennia, was being dismantled piece by enemies they couldn't see or communicate with. On the capital world, Vexthul was trying to coordinate a response using primitive radio communications. The few reports he received painted a picture of systematic destruction across the Empire. Hundreds of installations were under attack or had already fallen silent. "How many enemies are we facing?" he demanded. "Unknown, High Crystallarch. The attacking vessels are small and use stealth technology we cannot detect. They strike and withdraw before our forces can respond, then send out all available fleets. Spread them across our territory and hunt down these attackers." But this played directly into humanity's strategy. With communications down, Vorthak fleets were operating blindly. They had no way to coordinate with each other or respond to the rapidly changing tactical situation. Human forces could pick off isolated ships and avoid the larger concentrations of enemy vessels. Captain Donghyun Shin was commanding one such hunter-killer group, tracking a Vorthak cruiser squadron that was desperately trying to reach the capital world. The enemy ships were powerful, but they were also predictable. They followed standard Vorthak procedures because those were the only procedures they knew. "Target the lead cruiser first," Donghyun ordered. "Cascade torpedoes, full spread." The Vorthak squadron died without firing a shot. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, not weapons that turned their own hulls into resonating crystal that tore itself apart. Phase 3 was the most ambitious part of the operation. Dr. Shungjun Park's cascade virus, refined over years of research, was simultaneously uploaded into 17 major Vorthak data centers. These facilities served as backup communication hubs and contained detailed records of the Empire's population. The virus was elegant in its lethality. It identified the quantum signatures of individual Vorthak citizens and transmitted a specific resonance frequency to their location. Within hours of infection, the virus had spread through the entire crystal matrix network, carrying death to every connected crystal being in the galaxy. Dr. So-Young Kim monitored the virus deployment from her hidden laboratory. Screens around her showed the systematic collapse of Vorthak civilization as billions of crystal beings simply stopped. They didn't suffer. The resonance frequency shut down their neural networks instantly, but they also didn't survive. Virus deployment at 60% penetration, she reported. Estimated casualties, 11 billion Vorthak. It was genocide on a scale never before seen in galactic history. An entire species was being methodically exterminated by enemies they had dismissed as inferior servants. On the Vorthak homeworld, Vexthul felt the first effects of the cascade virus as a tingling sensation in his crystalline body. Around him, other crystal beings began to collapse as their neural networks failed. The virus had reached the capital world. "Emergency evacuation," he commanded, but there was no one left to hear him. His staff was dead or dying, their bodies shutting down as the cascade effect spread through their crystal matrices. Vexthul himself was partially shielded by his command chamber's specialized crystalline matrix, but he could feel the virus trying to penetrate his defenses. He had perhaps minutes before it reached him. In those final minutes, he finally understood what had happened to his empire. The humans had done this. The servants, the inferiors, the animals that the Vorthak had dismissed as harmless labor. They had studied their masters for years, learned their weaknesses, and struck with a precision that spoke of perfect knowledge and unlimited patience. "Impossible," he whispered. "Humans are not capable of such coordination." But the evidence was all around him. An empire that had stood for 3,000 years was dying in a matter of hours, brought down by the species they had considered least threatening. Fleet Admiral Kyung-Soo Bae received the final reports as the 72-hour operational window came to a close. The retribution of Hyunwoo had not fired a single shot, but it had coordinated the largest military victory in known history. Phase 3 completion confirmed, reported Yoonju Han. Cascade virus has achieved 97% penetration of the Vorthak population. Military resistance has ceased in all major systems. Estimated surviving Vorthak population? Kyung-Soo asked. Approximately 3,000 individuals, scattered across remote outposts and isolated colonies. All major population centers have gone silent. It was over. The Vorthak Empire, which had conquered 800 star systems and enslaved thousands of species, had been destroyed in 3 days by an enemy they had never taken seriously. Taemin Park, now serving as strategic operations coordinator, prepared the message that would announce humanity's victory to the galaxy. It was simple and direct. To all species of the Galactic Coalition, the Vorthak Empire has been terminated. Their fleets have been destroyed, their worlds have fallen silent, and their ability to wage war has been permanently eliminated. Humanity claims no territory and seeks no tribute. We wish only to establish a new order based on cooperation rather than domination. New management will be in contact shortly. The message was broadcast on all frequencies across the galaxy. For most species, it was the first indication that anything unusual had happened. The Vorthak had controlled information so tightly that their subject races had no idea their masters were dead until humans told them. The reactions varied. Some species celebrated. Others panicked. A few refused to believe that the seemingly invincible Vorthak could have been defeated so completely. But belief was irrelevant. The facts spoke for themselves. The Vorthak Empire was gone, and humanity had taken its place as the dominant power in the galaxy. On the bridge of the retribution of Hyunwoo, Admiral Kyung-Soo looked out at the dead Vorthak homeworld below. The planet's crystal cities were dark, their inhabitants silent forever. It should have been a moment of triumph, but all he felt was a profound sadness. "Was it worth it?" asked Captain Dong Hyun, who had joined him at the viewing. 6 months after the Silent Symphony, President Wu Jin's song stood before the largest gathering of alien species in galactic history. The former Vorthak capital world had been renamed New Sol, and its crystal palaces had been converted into meeting halls for the new Galactic Union. 2,000 species were represented in the Great Assembly Chamber, their delegates filling seats that had once been reserved for crystal being overlords. "We gather today not as conquerors and conquered," Wu Jin began, his words translated into 800 languages simultaneously, "but as equals seeking a common future. The age of empire is over. The age of cooperation begins now." The response was mixed. Some delegates applauded enthusiastically. Others sat in stunned silence, still unable to believe that the seemingly invincible Vorthak were truly gone. A few species were openly hostile, convinced that humanity would prove to be just another set of masters wearing friendlier masks. Wu Jin understood their skepticism. After all, humanity had just demonstrated the ability to eliminate an entire civilization in 72 hours. Fear was a natural response. "I know many of you have concerns," he continued. "You wonder if we will become the same kind of tyrants the Vorthak were. You worry that our talk of cooperation is simply a prettier word for subjugation. These concerns are valid, and we will address them through actions, not just words." Behind him, a holographic display showed the new structure of the Galactic Union. Unlike the rigid hierarchy of the Vorthak Empire, the Union was organized as a confederation of equal partners. Each species would govern its own territory while contributing to collective defense and trade coordination. The Galactic Union will be governed by a council representing all member species, Wu Jin explained. "Humanity will hold no special position except that which we earn through service. Our fleets exist to protect all Union members, not to enforce human will upon unwilling subjects." Marshal Bo-Ra Lim was responsible for making that promise a reality. She commanded the peacekeeping forces that had replaced the Vorthak military across 800 star systems. Her ships patrolled trade routes, mediated disputes, and prevented the kind of conflicts that had raged constantly during the Empire's decline. "The key difference," she explained to her officers during a fleet briefing, "is that we exist to serve the Union, not rule it. When species have disputes, we help them find solutions. When pirates threaten trade routes, we eliminate the threat. When anyone threatens the peace, we respond with exactly the amount of force necessary to restore order." It was a delicate balance. Humanity's military was by far the most powerful in the galaxy, but they had to use that power carefully. Too little force and chaos would consume the former empire. Too much force, and they would become the same kind of oppressors they had eliminated. The test cases came quickly. The Kalari Republic and the Thraxian hegemony both claimed the same resource-rich star system, a dispute that under Vorthak rule would have been settled by whoever could bribe the local crystal administrators. Under the new system, Marshal Bo-Ra's peacekeepers escorted diplomatic teams to the contested world and oversaw negotiations that resulted in a fair division of resources. "Both sides are satisfied," reported Captain Jae-hyun, who had commanded the peacekeeping mission. "The Kalari get the mineral rights, the Thraxians get the agricultural zones, and both species agree to share the system's strategic location for military purposes." It was exactly the kind of reasonable solution that had been impossible under Vorthak rule, where disputes were settled through favoritism and corruption rather than fairness. Ambassador Ji-hoon Ryu was working to establish similar diplomatic solutions across the galaxy. As head of the Union's diplomatic corps, he traveled constantly between member worlds, building relationships and resolving conflicts before they could escalate into violence. "The Vorthak never understood diplomacy," he observed during a meeting with the Leadership Council. "They ruled through fear and overwhelming force. When every dispute is settled by whoever is strongest, you never learn how to find mutually beneficial solutions." This gave humanity a significant advantage. Having lived as the weakest species in the galaxy for 2 centuries, humans had become experts at finding creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. They knew how to negotiate, compromise, and build coalitions. More importantly, they understood what it felt like to be powerless. This gave them genuine empathy for species that had suffered under Vorthak rule. The most challenging issue was what to do with the surviving Vorthak. Approximately 3,000 crystal beings had survived the Cascade virus, scattered across remote outposts and isolated colonies. They posed no military threat, but their mere existence raised difficult questions about justice and revenge. Many species want them eliminated completely, reported Intelligence Coordinator Hana Yu. The Zephyrians, in particular, are demanding that we finish what we started. It was understandable. The Zephyrians had suffered terribly under Vorthak rule, culminating in the genocide of 3 billion of their people just months before the Empire fell. They saw the surviving crystal beings as war criminals who deserved death, but President Wu Jin had made a different decision. "We will offer them a choice," he announced. "Integration into human society as equals, with surgical modification to remove their energy manipulation abilities, or exile to a designated preservation world where they can maintain their culture in isolation." The announcement was controversial. Many humans thought the Vorthak deserved the same fate they had inflicted on countless other species. But Wu Jin understood that how humanity treated its former enemies would define what kind of rulers they became. "If we simply execute them all," he explained to his critics, "we become the same kind of monsters they were." The goal was never to replace one tyranny with another. The goal was to build something better. Most of the surviving Vorthak chose exile. They were relocated to a remote world on the galaxy's edge, where they could live in peace without threatening anyone. A few dozen chose integration, undergoing surgical procedures that removed their crystalline networks and energy manipulation abilities. Among those who chose integration was Vex Thule, the former High Crystallarch who had ordered the death of Taemin's brother. The irony was not lost on anyone involved. "Why did you choose this?" Taemin asked during their first meeting since the Empire's fall. He was now serving as Director of Historical Documentation, tasked with preserving the complete record of what had happened and why. Vex Thule, his crystal body now dull and powerless, considered the question carefully. "Because I want to understand," he said finally. "For 3,000 years, the Vorthak believed we were the natural rulers of the galaxy. We thought being strong made us superior. You proved us wrong in the most complete way possible. And now you want to learn from your defeat? I want to learn how you achieved something we never could. You built a galactic government that species actually want to join. Under our rule, rebellions were constant. Under yours, they are non-existent. How is this possible?" It was a good question. The former Vorthak Empire was more stable under human leadership than it had ever been under crystal rule. Crime rates were down, trade was booming, and interspecies conflicts had dropped to historical lows. Dr. So-Young Kim had transitioned from weapons research to peaceful applications of the technology developed during the war. Her new Galactic Research Institute was developing medical treatments, improved communication systems, and terraforming techniques that would benefit all Union members. "The cascade technology that we use to destroy the Vorthak can also be used to heal," she explained to a gathering of xenobiologists. "By understanding how crystalline matrices fail, we can develop treatments for diseases that affect silicon-based life forms." It was a perfect example of humanity's approach to their new role. Instead of hoarding advanced technology as the Vorthak had done, they shared it freely with all Union members. This created genuine loyalty, rather than the sullen compliance that had characterized the old empire. Jinwu Li's transformation was equally dramatic. His smuggling network had become the backbone of the Union's trade infrastructure. Ships that had once hidden from Vorthak patrols now operated openly, carrying goods and passengers across 800 star systems. "The amazing thing," he said during an interview for the historical record, "is how much easier everything becomes when you're not fighting against the system. Under the Vorthak, we had to smuggle everything because they controlled trade through corruption and favoritism. Now we can just trade. It's revolutionary." General Minho Choi had perhaps the most challenging job of anyone in the new government. As head of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, he was responsible for documenting Vorthak crimes and helping their victims find closure, without creating cycles of revenge. "The goal is not to forget what happened," he explained to a gathering of survivors from various atrocities. "The goal is to remember it in a way that helps us build a better future. The Vorthak are gone. We cannot bring back the dead, but we can ensure that such tragedies never happen again." It was slow, difficult work. Many species wanted revenge rather than reconciliation, but gradually the Commission's efforts began to bear fruit. Memorial worlds were established to honor the victims of Vorthak,